based on EOG or EOC scores. Section 5.9 waives the statutory CPR graduation requirement for students who cannot complete it due to school closure but are otherwise qualified to graduate. Section 5.10 allows remote instruction to satisfy the statutory instructional time requirement and waives student attendance enforcement requirements for the 2019-20 fiscal school year. Section 5.11 requires public school units to develop a remote instruction plan and adds 5 remote instruction days to the 2020-2021 school calendar year. Section 5.12 would permit eligible schools for purposes of the principal recruitment salary supplement to continue to be eligible schools from the 2019-20 school year to the 2020-21 school year and clarify an incorrect statutory reference. Section 5.13 would waive the requirement for the 2020-2021 school year that principals notify teachers of updated education value added assessment system EVOS data from the 2019-2020 school year. Section 5.14 would waive requirements that local school administrative units provide the State Board of Education with teacher performance data from the 2019-2020 school year, and that the State Board includes such data in its own report. And also add a missing statutory heading to section 115C-299.5 of the general statutes. Section 5.15 would permit annual teacher evaluations from the 2019-2020 school year to be based on observations completed in the 2019-2020 school year prior to the closure of public schools and other artifacts and evidence from the 2019-2020 school year. Waives any required observations not completed prior to the closure of public schools. Section 5.16 waives requirements in the 2019-2020 school year for non-public schools to administer and maintain records of standardized tests. Section 5.17 waives requirements for non-public schools to keep attendance records during the closure of public schools by the governor and operate for at least 9 calendar months in the 2019-2020 school year. Section 5.18 waives requirements in the 2019-2020 school year for non-public schools with students receiving opportunity scholarship grants to administer and report on standardized tests. Section 5.19 allows the State Education Assistance Authority to use carry forward from the Opportunity Scholarship Program to remit scholarship grant funds by October 1st, 2020 to a non-public school that was unable to complete a parent endorsement for those funds for the spring semester of the 2019-2020 school year. Section 5.20 provides a 1-month extension for the authority to submit its annual reports on the Opportunity Scholarship Grant Program and the Disabilities Grant Program to the Joint Legislative Education Oversight Committee. Section 5.21, under certain conditions, waives minimum EPP admission requirements, waives EPP student clinical internship requirements, modifies pedagogy assessments for certain teacher candidates, waives the report of certain EPP performance data, prohibits certain EPP data from being considered in assigning sanctions, and suspends EPP report card publication for the 2019-2020 academic year. Section 5.22 provides that requirements will be deemed completed for the year-long internship school administrator requirement and the portfolio requirement for emerging leaders, provided it is finished to the extent practicable prior to completion of the school administrator preparation program. Section 5.23 provides that the school leader clinical practice requirement will be deemed completed under certain conditions and that a grant recipient shall not have grant funds retrieved for failure to require school leader candidates to complete a full-time paid clinical practice during the 2019-2020 academic year. Section 5.24 provides 1-year extensions for teachers to meet licensure requirements set by the State Board and for teachers who are required to meet continuing education requirements for continuing licensure by June 30th, 2020. Provides a 1-year extension to meet those requirements. Section 5.25 provides 1-year extensions for school administrators and other school personnel to meet licensure examination requirements set by the State Board, and for school administrators who are required to meet continuing education requirements for licensure renewal by June 30th, 2020, provides a 1-year extension to meet those requirements. Section 5.26 provides that a student who is unable to participate in an apprenticeship program due to the COVID-19 emergency may be eligible for a tuition waiver for community college courses until December 31st, 2020. Section 5.27 provides that a constituent institution shall not accrue or charge interest to a past due account receivable held by a student between March 13th, 2020 and September 15th, 2020. Section 5.28 extends various report dates for the University of North Carolina. Section 5.29 provides parameters for summer learning programs in reading and math for elementary school students, and the funds were allocated earlier in this act. Moving from the education policy revisions to just other general policy revisions, Section 6.1 authorizes state agencies to waive, delay, or modify agency requirements or actions when the agency determines it is the public interest. It further authorizes the delaying of the collection of or modification to methods of collection for fees, fines, or late payments, including interest. Delaying of renewals of permits, license, certifications, registrations, or authorizations of the applicable agency. And delaying or modifying agency implemented education and exam requirements. Further, it authorizes the adopting of emergency rules for purposes of implementing this section. Section 6.2 extends for 6 months the validity of any credential issued by the Division of Motor Vehicles, and the term credential is defined in that section, that expires between March 1st and August 1st, 2020. Further, it waives penalties, fines, and fees associated with failing to renew extended credentials, and correspondingly extends the due date for motor vehicle taxes for extended registrations. Section 6.2, capital A, prohibits the Medical Board and Board of Nursing from enforcing quality improvement rules provisions that required meetings between a physician and physician assistant or nurse practitioner if the practicing within and continuing to practice within the scope of the license prior to February 1st, 2020, or during the first 6 months of a practice arrangement. Further, disallows enforcement of annual review rules or rules requiring individuals to fill out an application or pay a fee by an individual providing volunteer healthcare services within the scope of their license in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Section 6.3 allows the state treasurer to defer state health plan premiums or debt payments until the state of emergency is rescinded or expires. Section 6.4 authorizes DHHS to provide Medicaid coverage for COVID-19 testing for certain uninsured individuals during the declared nationwide public health emergency period, where the federal medical assistance percentage is 100%. Section 6.4 Cap A provides that the duration of temporary Medicaid provider rate increases is limited to the earlier of January 31st, 2021, or the expiration of the declared nationwide public health emergency. Section 6.5 authorizes a commitment examiner to use telehealth communications to conduct a second examination of a respondent and voluntary commitment proceedings for mental illness and substance use disorders, and commit the respondent if satisfied to a reasonable medical certainty that the required determinations would be made if done in the physical presence of the examining physician. Section 6.6 provides civil immunity for healthcare providers who render healthcare services related to COVID-19 treatments during the period of the COVID-19 emergency if the healthcare provider is arranging and providing healthcare services pursuant to COVID-19 emergency rule. The decisions or activities related to the arrangement or provision of healthcare services impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and the healthcare provider acts in good faith. Immunity is not applicable if there is gross negligence, reckless misconduct, or intentional infliction of harm by the provider. Section 6.7 requires the Lottery Commission to submit a report for COVID-19 and associated economic impact on sales of lottery games, revenues, retailers, expenses, and transfers of net revenue. Section 6.8 adds a reporting requirement for local finance officers to submit statements of financial information concerning COVID-19 impacts on local finances by January 1st, 2021. Further, the Local Government Commission must identify local units needing assistance and report on the information provided to the General Government Oversight Committee and Fiscal Research Division. Section 6.9 suspends until July 15th, 2020, any requirement for a report due between March 10th and July 14th, 2020 to a joint legislative oversight committee. Section 6.10 requires OSBM to release certain grant funds authorized in the 2017 budget. Section 6.11 uses increased availability from Federal Child Care and Development Fund block grant funds for the 2019-20 fiscal year to address immediate child care needs resulting from the coronavirus emergency. Section 6.12 provides time-limited authority for notaries and Register of Deeds to perform acknowledgments and administer oaths and affirmation through the use of video conference technology if certain requirements are met. Further, extends for 45 days the time for applicants to appear before a Register of Deeds and take the general oath of office. Section 6.13 provides time-limited authority for a person to witness a principal sign a document by using video conference technology if certain requirements are met. Section 6.14 provides time-limited waiver of the requirement and that the principal's signature be executed in the presence of 2 qualified witnesses for purpose of healthcare powers of attorney and advance directives for a natural death. Section 6.15 provides time-limited authority during the COVID-19 declaration of emergency to a settlement agent to make disbursement of closing funds prior to recordation of deeds, deeds of trust, and any other required loan documents. Section 6.16 extends duration of marriage license and provides time-limited authority for a Register of Deeds to issue a license for marriage via remote audio-video communication for positively identified applicants. Section 6.17 waives the accrual of interest on individual income tax and corporate income and franchise tax returns due on or before April 15th, 2020, from April 15th to July 15th, and extends certain tax-related deadlines to the same extent extended by the IRS for federal income tax returns. Section 6.18 affirms the flexibility in administering the state's unemployment compensation laws as provided in Executive Orders number 118 and 131. Further, provides an SUTA tax credit equal to the amount of contributions payable by the employer on the SUTA report due on April 30th, 2020. Section 6.19 through Section 6.21 makes certain DES and UI Oversight Committee recommendations, including broadening the way to satisfy weekly job contacts, allowing an employer to initiate an unemployment claim for employees when the unemployment is due directly to a disaster covered by a federal disaster declaration, providing that a lien for county property taxes does not take priority over a previously filed lien for past due contributions, and repealing the sunset of the Oversight Committee, making it a permanent statutory oversight committee. Section 6.22 through 6.23 temporarily changes weekly benefit amount for unemployment to the highest paid completed quarter of the individual's base period divided by 52, rounded to the next lowest whole dollar. Further increases the weekly benefit maximum from $350 to $400. Section 6.24 provides and allows for certain public hearings, quasi-judicial hearings, voting, counting of members for purposes of a quorum, and meetings of public bodies through the use of remote meetings during certain declarations of emergency, if certain requirements, including notice, simultaneous communication, document provision, voting, recordation, and simultaneous live streaming are met. Section 6.25 directs OSBM to establish a time-limited pandemic recovery office to oversee and coordinate federal funds for COVID-19 recovery. The authority for this office is for 12 months from the effective date of this act. Section 6.26 disallows funds for testing, contract tracing, and trends tracking to be dispersed to DHHS until DHS meets certain requirements. Further requires DHHS to report on the use of funds to the appropriate oversight committees within 6 months of receipt of funds. This ties back to the earlier $25 million allocation I discussed in section 3.3, I believe. Section 6.27 provides time-limited civil liability immunity to essential businesses for injuries or death resulting from contracting COVID-19 for customers doing business and employees working at the business if not caused by gross negligence, reckless misconduct, or intentional infliction of harm. Section 7.1 is boilerplate language, providing that the headings in the act are for reference only. Section 7.2 is a severability clause, providing that if portions of the act are found invalid by the court, the invalidity does not affect other portions that can be given effect without the invalid portions. And lastly, the effective date is except as otherwise provided. It's effective when it becomes law. Senator Jackson, that concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Luke, and get you a glass of water. That was just long. We appreciate that very much. Members, the rules state that all amendments must be submitted by 11 o'clock. We will be taking amendments in this committee until 11 o'clock, which of course, if you can't get your amendment drafted in that point of time, amendments can be offered on the floor when this bill comes up. At this time, I'm going to ask Will, if he will, to sort of walk us through how to chat and ask questions briefly again from yesterday's training course.
Good morning, members. Again, this is Will Tomlinson. I'm with the Information Systems Division here at the General Assembly. On your screen, I am going to share my meeting window so that I can give you just a real quick overview of some of the features. We went over most of this yesterday. Two primary things that I want to bring to your attention. The first one is this button right here is how you will mute your microphone or unmute your microphone when it's time for you to ask a question or make a comment. If you are on a smartphone or tablet, you may see this button in a different location, but it'll be the same regardless. If it is red, it means you're muted. If it's gray, that means you're unmuted. The other feature that I'd like to bring your attention to is the chat feature. That would be this button right here. Again, if you're on a phone or a tablet, it will actually be behind the More button, and you can find the chat feature. But if you're on your General Assembly laptop or a personal laptop or other desktop computer, it will be this chat feature. When you click on that, you'll be able to chat committee clerk. And if I bring up my participants list, I can find the committee clerk here, and I can send him a message. Hey, I want to ask a question. And so you'll see here that it'll say that my message is to Christopher Stock, committee clerk, and it'll say privately. That just means that I'm sending the message directly to him and not to the entire group. You do have the option to send a message to the entire group or to other participants in the meeting. But if you do want to speak or ask a question, please send those messages to Mr. Stock. Those will be timestamped and provided to the chairman in the order that they are received, and the chairman will then call on you to make your statement or ask your question. We do ask that you continue to mute your microphones until you are called upon. If you do have trouble, I will attempt to help unmute you at the time that you're called upon. Do any of you have any questions about the WebEx application, how to chat, or how to find your other participants? Excellent. Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Will. Appreciate that very much. Members, we have until 11 o'clock, approximately 8 minutes before the cutoff time for amendments. And just so you know, at some point in time, we'll be recessing this committee to go review the amendments and come back, but we'll certainly keep you updated as to when that will be and how long we'll be in recess. At this time, I will be more than happy to start entertaining questions. And I think we have our first question from Senator Don Davis.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and to all of the committee members. Mr. Chair, I just wanted to first, in the midst of this pandemic, commend the excellent staff that we have here at the General Assembly. They are working overtime immensely for all of the members. Obviously, the House has been having working groups. As we're now beginning to have committee meetings and to deal with this relief package, I know I have reached out to staff. Actually, I started a couple days ago and still haven't gotten a call back. Then I'd reached out to staff yesterday. I could pull up the email. I would share with you the dedication we have to our staff. They were emailing back and forth at 11 o'clock last night. I sent another email asking for a call. Still haven't had a chance to get a call back. And we're trying to prepare these amendments for the committee. And I just want clarity on the 11 o'clock. If, the staff has been, the best I can tell, overwhelmed. And I know this committee has been kind enough to extend that period in the past where we have not been dealing with the pandemic and digital meetings and so forth. And I would just ask, Mr. Chair, if you would be willing to, as you have yourself been gracious enough to extend that time, if you would allow that opportunity for this meeting this morning.
Senator Davis, thank you for your question and your comments concerning staff, and you're absolutely correct. My hat is off to them, as well as Senator Brown and Harrington, and for all the work they've put into this. But at this time, we are going to have, for only requests, they must be made by 11 o'clock. Request must be made by 11 o'clock.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Next question. We have no other questions at this time. Do we have discussion of the bill?
Mr. Senator Jackson,
Yes.
this is Senator Chaudhary. I've got a number of questions.
Okay. Have you submitted them, Jay?
I have not. Do I?
That's okay. We're being recorded, so it'll be on the record. Go ahead.
You want me to submit them by committee clerk?
Well, that would be the preferable way, but since no one else has submitted any, I'm willing to take them as right now.
Okay. I hope everybody can hear us. I just before I make a few comments and questions, I also just wanted to applaud you and the staff for working so hard on this bill. I know that this is a large-scale effort to deal with a pandemic that I know has been devastating on multiple fronts to the state. I have a series of questions that focus on a couple of different sections. First of all, if I can draw your attention to two parts in section 5.11A, and I've talked to Senator Davis about this, and I'm working to prepare an amendment, a friendly amendment, I hope, but I think it might be important just to get some feedback from Senator Ballard and others. Number one, I guess I have heard both from some organizations and teachers that the June 30th deadline to have the remote planning in place was a bit realistic, given that we do not know what the school year will look like, in addition to the social distancing measures that would be in place. And so, my question is, I actually did not include this in the actual amendment, is number one, whether that date might be able to be pushed back to allow for more time for those remote learning plans to be put in place. So,
Senator Chaudhary, let me ask you this: are you going to be offering some amendments?
I would like to, but what I thought is that maybe just at least have a brief discussion on this, Senator Jackson.
Before you offer the amendment?
Yes,
or
sir.
are you talking about in lieu of an amendment, or the discussion is going to determine if you're going to have an amendment?
That's correct. The discussion would determine whether to have an amendment.
Okay, well, just so you know now, you got 2 minutes to submit them.
Okay, well, I've submitted a request for one amendment already.
Okay.
Okay.
Would you like to direct your question then to Senator Ballard?
1 second, real quick, please.
Let me do that.
Okay, Senator Ballard, are you willing to take the question?
I am willing to take the question.
Okay. Repeat your question again, Jay, unless do you have it, Deanna, already?
I'm good. I'm
Okay.
good, Senator Jackson. I'm happy to move forward. Regarding the date of June 30th for the remote learning plan, that was essentially thinking that the local school
Okay.
boards have already drafted their new calendar at the beginning of June and started building their schedules at that point and implementing and pulling together different scenarios for plans. I'm happy to entertain an extension
Hold on 1
to
second.
July.
You're asking a
That would
question
be
in
a week
committee.
before school began, or a month before
It's
school.
regarding trying to get these amendments in.
Okay.
Senator Davis, if you would mute your mic, please. Thank you. Okay, Senator Treasury.
Thank you, Senator Jackson. I have a secondary question that relates to this section as well. If I could direct that to you, Mr. Chair, or to Senator Ballard.
Okay, please do.
Senator Ballard, the second point that I wanted to make is, as a parent who's been directly involved with remote learning for both my children, I'd say a couple of things. Number one is, I think it goes without saying that any parent that's experienced this over the past several weeks now gets a glimpse of how hard it is to teach our children. And so, certainly hats off to our teachers and to Senator Smith, who is a teacher. And second, remote learning can be hard and different for some children. Just in my household, as an example, each child responds differently to remote learning. In some instances it works, and in some instances it does not work. And so, I wouldn't lie to you to tell you that there's not been a fair amount of frustration and even yelling in our house trying to follow up on the online curriculum. If you talk to educators, I think they would tell you that remote learning presents a threat to our children's academic process, and it's not really similar to adult learning. Which brings me to my suggestion. I know that on line 45 of page 17, there is a provision that essentially says that the remote learning has to be commensurate with in-class learning, or not online learning. I think from my perspective, and I think if you talk to educators and even health experts, they would say that that's an unrealistic standard. My amendment was essentially just to strike the rest of that sentence in the language. I still think that the aspirations of meeting what needs to be mastered by students and teachers remain the same, and I just wanted to get your comment and opinion on that idea.
Senator Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Chaudhary, the elements of section 5.11 are basically just kind of a starting point and an outline. As you can tell, the LEAs will actually develop these plans, understanding their own resources, their own experience during the last 45 plus days of remote instruction, really in order to develop a plan that's going to suit their district and their schools and their students as well. Again, this is just a starting point. These were just lifted from previous documents, from other states actually that are a part of this. And then in talking with educators, actually we did, and talking about their experiences, as well as looking at what DEI did on a remote learning survey. But this is just a starting point. As I mentioned, this was also worked on in conjunction with the House and with Representative Clemens and Representative Horn and Fraley. So these were kind of thought through and kind of pitched, I guess, and we're still able to kind of work on this as we move along. Again, this is just a starting point. So I'm happy to review your potential amendment at 11:01.
Thank you, Senator Ballard. Thank you, Senator Chaudhary. It is 11:02 by my Mickey Mouse clock, and so the time frame to submitting amendments to this committee or having them requested in is over. But again, I encourage you, if you still have an amendment that you were not able to submit, we will be taking amendments and hearing them on the floor. At this time, we have Senator Woodard for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have some questions regarding section 6.1, the regulatory flexibility. I spent some time reviewing this last night and reviewing current statute on this. And so I'm not sure if one of the bill sponsors could address this for me. In reviewing this, it seems to me that, so I would like to hear what the thinking was about this section. But a lot of the authority that seems to be addressed here in current statute, I believe, is already provided for the governor and other executive branch officials to do this. My biggest concern and where I'd like to hear from the sponsors was in section 6.1B. As I read this, it says every state agency shall review its rules, policies, procedures. And I guess I'm trying to understand the rationale for this review, given the work we're going to be asking of all of these agencies of state government in the months ahead as we recover from the COVID crisis. You're looking at the cabinet departments that report directly to the governor. And in those, I see DHHS, DEQ, Revenue, among others, Commerce, who all are going to already have their hands full and will have their hands full quite a bit more. And also in the executive branch, every council of state agency. So I'm looking at agriculture, labor, insurance, the treasurer's division, the Department of Justice. We're asking them to review all of their rules, policies, and procedures and report back by October 1st. That seems overly burdensome to me at a time when we're asking much of these agencies, and I'm trying to understand what the rationale for that is. It just seems like a lot of work, and I just want to know for what purpose we're asking for this. What's the value of reviewing all of these things, particularly given that I believe most of these agencies and the governor has the authority to do that. And particularly when section 6.1C, I believe, is the meat of this section. And so I find B to be somewhat superfluous, redundant, and just a lot of extra work.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Woodard, for that question. I could have a little fun with you and say, since you wanted a sponsor to answer it, you're a sponsor. Would you like to answer your own question? But I won't.
Thank you, Senator Jackson. I think Senator Wells and I did real good on our section. So whoever was the primary author of this one, I would defer to them.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Woodard. Senator Wells, would you like to respond to that question, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see 6.1 as just a first step in the rest of 6.1. If you look down at 6.1B as being the first step of the rest of 6.1, when you move down to 6.1C, you also see that they have to make a determination. I think the first step of any of that is to go through the policies and see which ones need to be adjusted to take care of this event. So I don't see this as extra. I just say we've laid out the steps in a very organized way so that every agency will be able to go through them systematically, just like all the other agencies, and to lead us down through the various sections of 6.1.
Thank you, Senator Wells. Senator Woodard, do you have a follow-up?
Well, I do. And Senator Wells and I have worked on regulatory reform quite a bit over the last couple of years, and I think have been good partners here. And so I just guess I'm still trying to get to the intent of this section. If what we're trying to do is work on regulatory reform, I guess I'm trying to connect this to the COVID response. How is this action related to COVID? If we still have more work to do on reg reform, then plenty of time to do that. We can take that up in the short session. Senator Wells, I know you and I have had a lot of talk about good, responsible reg reform legislation. At this time, this just seems to me to be a lot of extra work, particularly given if you read the statutes as I do, and I'm happy to be corrected by lawyers or those more familiar with the statute, many of these agencies already have authority to do some of this now. And again, it just seems to me to be a lot of work that it's not COVID related if our intent is just to continue our work on reg reform.
Thank you, Senator Woodard. I would just like to add to this, and Senator Wells might want to chime in, but I would just add that the value is to make sure that our citizens aren't being overly regulated or harmed where these agencies, where and when these agencies can lift restrictions. And I think that's part of the process here. So I do think it is related to the COVID-19 pandemic we're currently in. Senator Wells, would you like to add any more to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I would agree with what you said. There are so many people not operating right now and they are frustrated by a lack of information and a lack of communication about what is going on. I think setting forward for this crisis a systematic approach and treating everybody the same across state government, so that all of our citizens will know what's coming at them as we go through this. And the last thing we want to do is have some state agency come up with something 6 months from now that, oh, we missed something. This pretty well lays out that they'll go through a process, a consistent process, a public process across state government that everybody knows what we're going to be dealing with.
Thank you, Senator Wells. Thank you, Senator Woodard, for those questions.
Well, Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir, Senator Woodard.
jump back in just so looking at this and in conversation with some of our House colleagues, I would just ask Senator Wells if he would consider looking at section 6.1b. Again, I just think that's overly broad and not necessarily COVID related, whereas I understand 6.1c. I know our House colleagues are going to remove 6.1b. This is just going to be a point of contention and conference that our House colleagues have recognized some of the issues that I've raised. So I would like to have further conversation, and we can do it offline, if we would look at 6.1b and potentially possibly removing that, continuing with the other sections of the of this. I understand 6.1c, but 6.1b is still problematic, and I believe our House colleagues have seen that and are going to take care of that in their bill.
Okay, thank you, Senator Woodard. And yes, please continue I encourage you to have offline conversations, concerning this. But thank you for your comments. Senator Erica Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am. And you're welcome.
Thank you. I sent in about 3 requests for amendments because I'm just not sure what section they fit in, and I did not see that appropriation within the bill. So perhaps you could answer the question, and or staff can direct me to what section of the bill that I can find this information. I am concerned about funding for the Department of Public Safety, specifically for the Division of Prisons, as we look at reducing our prison population because of the health disparity, the significant impact, and placing in grave danger not only the inmates who are close confined and can't practice social distancing, but we also have the issue with our correction officers and correctional facility employees having to place their lives at risk and the lives of their families at risk. We do know that we have a large breakout at Noose Correction. So what section of the bill addresses any appropriations for DPS or the Division of Prisons to address COVID-19?
Okay.
That's my first question.
Okay, thank you, Senator Smith, for that question. And we all appreciate the work that they have been doing. It would be on page 6 of the bill. Lines 15.
Line 15?
No, I'm sorry. The 15 million and I'm sorry, not line 15, item 15, $70 million for state agencies to access. Page 6, line 28, item 15.
Okay, so that's the $70 million to the Office of State Budget Management, and that's going to be divided through DPS and our other state agencies, correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. That is the intent of this language.
Is there any specific language that addresses direct appropriations for two areas, for facilitating in-home detention for nonviolent offenders, health compromised offenders, elderly offenders, and especially all juvenile justice offenders who really should be with their families at a critical time like this, to assist with in-home monitoring devices? So I don't see that anywhere in the bill. And I was just wondering if there's any consideration or discussion about having a provision specifically for DPS for the magnitude of what needs to be done. And the second part of that question is hazard pay, hazard duty pay for our state employees, correction officers, as well as essential employees who have to be on the front line, moving our state through this pandemic.
Senator Smith, I'm not exactly sure on the first part of your question. I do not recall hearing that. On the second part of your question, I do know that is included. I'm going to ask Jennifer Hoffman if she would to sort of try and answer both those questions for you, if she would, please. Jennifer?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jackson. Senator Smith, on the second question about hazard pay, that is an allowable use under that item that Senator Jackson referenced, number 15, the $70 million to OSBM. That is for the continuity of state government, and the list that the eligible costs that are shown in that section are just illustrative. It's not exclusive to those items, and the Office of State Human Resources does have a communicable disease policy on who is allowed to receive additional pay. And so this would be an allowable use.
Okay, thank you. That answers
part of your question. I think it depends on whether or not the executive branch is allowing folks to be monitored at home. And if so, if additional funds are needed to allow that to happen, again, this pot of money could be used.
Okay, Roger. Thank you so much for answering that question.
Okay. Follow up, Senator Smith?
Yes, well, I have a follow-up. I have another question, if that's okay.
Sure.
Two more quick questions. On page 5, item 6, the $20 million for animal depopulation. Mr. Chairman, I was wondering if you could explain what that means, what that includes, and also, I know that it's illustrative, but does it exclude crop growers who may have interruption in supply chain due to COVID-19?
Senator Smith, I'll be happy to answer that question to the best of my ability. As you well know, we are facing a tremendous shortage of processing plants having to close across this country, as well as the potential of some here in North Carolina. So when those plants close, these animals cannot continue to, they can continue to be fed, but at some point in time, they're going to have to be euthanized. And this $20 million is being used for that purpose of all livestock. Crops was not considered in this request and has not been discussed as far as crop damage and so forth, and crops being destroyed at this time. There is federal help being developed and implemented that I know of currently nationwide for the destruction of crops.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. And my last question, on page 8, the $9 million for the Department of for DIT. My concern is that I know that the governor proposed 180 hotspots to be dispatched across the state for various students. I am having a significant issue with constituents trying to be connected during COVID-19 because we know that the broadband access is extremely challenged in the rural parts of the state. I understand that the bill covers some provisions for great grants, but I was also wondering if the appropriation of $9 million is significant enough to address the impact of connecting people across North Carolina who don't have access. They don't have access to telemedicine. They don't have access to the technology devices. They don't have access to broadband. They can't even order their groceries online because they don't have internet access. So what is going to be done? That $9 million, I believe, falls way short of what is going to be needed to cover. Is there any other line item that we might perhaps be able to increase that amount of funding from 9 million to maybe 15 million?
Senator Smith, that's an excellent question. And it's my understanding we already have, this 9 million will get us up to $24 million in the GRAPE program. And that was what the request that we've already received through the cutoff date was for 24 million. So we're trying to match that request with the dollars, and that's what the additional $9 million is for. But I totally agree with your broadband and the whole spectrum out there of how badly it is needed across rural North Carolina. And that 24 million is just for this cycle only.
Okay.
We've added
Thank you,
9
Mr.
million to
Chairman.
the current cycle, if that
makes sense.
or what I'm saying. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for answering my questions.
You're certainly welcome, Senator Smith. Senator Chaudhry.
Thank you, Senator Jackson. I have a couple of questions for you regarding Part 4, Section 4.1 on page 9. Specifically, the section states that it is the intent of the General Assembly to appropriate funds for election security in a subsequent act of the General Assembly. As you know, Mr. Chair, the United States Congress passed the CARES Act that appropriated in North Carolina approximately $11 million to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus domestically for the federal 2020 federal election cycle. And obviously, in order for us to draw down such dollars, the state must provide a match requirement of 20% or $2.2 million. In the legislative request from the State Board of Election, the executive director made a request for those dollars to offset the significant new and increased cost to the counties because of a projected increase of voter absentee by ballot participation rate. My question, Mr. Chair, is twofold. Is the intent language in this bill regarding a subsequent act of the General Assembly, does that mean that there will be another bill during this current session for such an appropriation?
Senator Chaudhry, that's a good question, and I'm glad you brought it up. To answer your question in short, in a quick fashion, is yes. This will not be the last we will be dealing with this during our 2020 session, and it is our intentions we come back in a few weeks and start this process over again. Is the Senate's intention, and there should be something going out on that hopefully today as to what we intend, but we are still working on this, and we've got to the end of the year to get it done, but we are still working on it. So thank you for that question.
Senator Jackson, just one other follow-up, please.
Sure.
My other follow-up, and I suspect I know what the answer to this will be, hopefully the same as your response to my previous question. As you also know, there are HAVA funds that are federal election security funds that were authorized in late 2019, and that also requires matching fund. So I'm assuming that perhaps that same bill will address the drawing down the federal election funds as well through the HAVA matching fund as well.
Senator Chaudhry, in this particular instance in question, your assumption is right. We do have to the end of the year to take care of this, and that is our intentions. We had a lot of discussion on this, and then we realized we had until the end of the year to do that. So that's what we're planning on doing when we come back in.
Into the fiscal year, I hope, Senator Jackson.
Not the end of this fiscal year, but by the end of December.
Well, just a point of clarification, Senator Jackson, if I might.
And the election is in November. We get it. We're working on
it. Senator Jackson, may I just make one comment?
Yes, sir. Yeah, absolutely.
I would only say that Yes, if we're looking at the end of the year, it will obviously be too late to draw down those dollars to be used for the.
Chaudhry, I just have been corrected by a text message. We are planning on doing it by the end of this fiscal year, so I stand corrected.
Okay, well then then thank you.
You're certainly welcome. Okay, who's next in line? Senator Van Dyne. Senator Van Dyne?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question about why the Department of Justice was removed from the state agency definition in section 6.1.
Okay. Let me get to that 6.1. And so your question is, why was the Department of what removed?
Department of Justice.
Department of Justice. I do not have the answer to that question, Senator Van Dyne, but I'm Jennifer or Deborah, if y'all can help me out here. Or Senator Brown, Harrington.
Senator Jackson.
Yes.
Sorry about that. This is Luke Gillenwater.
Hey, Luke.
There really isn't an answer. I believe it was just a policy decision. So the sponsors may want to speak to it.
Okay. Van Dyne, that's the best I can tell you.
Follow up.
Sure.
What is the implication of that policy?
Senator Van Dyne, you're over my head on this one. I do not know the.
Sorry, Luke Gillenwater again. It means they don't go through the exercise set out.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
It means that they wouldn't have to go through what's set out, the process set out in section 6.1.
Okay. Senator Warren Daniel, can you offer some insight on this question?
Repeat the question, please.
The question was, why was the Department of Justice taken out of the definition in section 6.1?
Let me see if I can find that.
Thank you.
And also Senator Wells would have a response to this as well, Senator Van Dyne.
(6.1), what line?
I'm sorry, I don't have the bill open in front of me.
Senator Warren and Wells, I'll try and repeat the question and correct me if I'm wrong, Senator Van Dyne, but she's basically wanting to know why DOJ was left out of this section.
And I'd have to, I mean, I guess I can't, there's a lot of sections under 6.1. There's A through H, so I'm not sure like what we're referring to.
We're referring to the definition of state agency.
A3. That's what I'm being told.
I'm sorry?
It should be, it's A3 under 6.1.
Yeah, I see. Okay, I see it now. Does not include the Department of Justice. Okay, I don't know the answer to that, but we can find out.
Thank you.
Senator Wells, do you have a comment on this as well?
I don't, but we will check, as Senator Daniel said.
It's not the only agency that's excluded. There's two others, but.
Senator Van Dyne, we'll get you an answer on this. But thank you for the question. You're welcome. Follow up?
No, but can I ask another question?
Yes, ma'am. That's what I meant by follow up.
Okay. I haven't seen anything for individuals in terms of assistance with to prevent evictions, like rent assistance or mortgage assistance. Does that appear anywhere in the bill?
To my knowledge, that is not in this particular bill. And what I'm calling it, just in my opinion, is phase one of this relief, but it is not in there. Although we thought we would give it some more time because we know the governor has put in executive orders, you know, the extensions of those things. And so we're trying to see how that plays out as well.
Okay, and then could I ask one procedural question?
Yes, ma'am.
Public comment. Will we, since the public is not part of this online convocation, will we summarize orally what public comments have come in, or how can the public participate?
Okay, bear with me 1 second because I think we have allowed public comment to be taken, and that was notified yesterday, I believe. Hold on 1 second, please. Okay. We do have a portal that was set up, and we are receiving some public comment, and it will be shared with staff as well as all the members.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Senator Don Davis. Senator
So
Davis.
much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, if I may just be recognized for a series of questions, if that's okay with you.
Fine series.
We have to continue with the great tradition of our institution that the late distinguished Senator McKissick established for us. But
I realized Senator McKissick had passed away. My condolences to the family. I'll go with you for a while, Senator Davis.
All right, and I want to focus on some education questions this morning. So my first question is, when we're putting in place or having discussions about putting in place plans for distance learning, remote learning, my question is, what is the pathway in terms of with the appropriations? Because there were a lot of discussions in a consent budget that was sent forward from DPI as well as the state board. And I just want to understand that we will have the capacity to actually respond and provide any distance learning or remote learning that we're hereby establishing in a plan.
Is that a question for me?
It could be Jennifer or Deanna. I'm sorry. Yes, Deanna, if you don't mind, jump right in.
Sure. Thank you, Senator Davis. Just to kind of elaborate on this point a little bit and anything on the digital side, there's a lot of dollars right now that have been flowing into DTI regarding whether it's remote learning instruction or devices or, digital instruction and that kind of thing. I think what we're trying to do is just get some more information and data regarding what funds are coming through from even the governor's $50 million pot that districts already have, understanding what districts are already doing and utilizing what they already have in regards to how we kind of maybe build this out even financially a little bit more. It is something this is just a starting point again. It's an ongoing conversation and really just trying to making sure we understand we have a lay of the land of the current situation too. Hope that helps a little bit.
Okay.
Senator Davis, did that help you?
A question, Mr. Chair? So when we look at these different moving pots, I'm assuming that's considering federal dollars as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And a follow-up to that then is, as we are not only, as I'm understanding, looking potentially at how to piece the dollars together for the digital or remote learning, but as we then are maybe looking at seeing how federal dollars are dispersed, have we also to consider the timing of those dollars coming in potentially being dispersed?
Senator Ballard, would you like to respond to that?
Are you asking me exactly when the federal dollars are coming in, or just in context of how things are being rolled out and how to factor that into the planning?
Senator Davis.
I'm asking in the context of the planning, because if we're putting plans in place hypothetically for remote learning, but the federal dollars do not come in or not made available, hypothetically until, let's say, July, I mean, how are we matching up how these dollars will flow with the priorities of our state?
I mean, I just think that's continuing to be a work in progress. Clearly, folks have some bearings now and understanding of what is needed, even from a resource standpoint, and how to build out plans, what best practice is, what's working, what's not working. So it's not like they have to wait for the dollars to understand how to build out and map out a potential structure, in my opinion. But I mean, this is something that we are continuing to work through and work on. It's something that we'll continue to work on, talk on with the House as well. So.
Okay. And
Ballard.
while we're talking about, yes, and while we're talking about the those digital learning plans, has there been any thought or consideration when we're putting in the bill language that would require those plans to essentially prepare students at the same level of growth that they were in the classroom? Have we considered the transition that it may require for maybe some school districts that are not at the same level of others to actually implement that statutory obligation if this is passed?
Thank you, Senator Davis. Again, on that point, that's kind of in line with, I think, what Senator Shodery was asking as well earlier regarding that point. But again, just to reiterate, this is what you call a remote instruction and a remote learning plan. So that's clearly evidence that the fact that we know that not everything is really going to be as digitized as there are in some other areas, which is again also why we are leaving it up to the LEAs to determine how best to provide a remote learning plan for their district based on the resources that they have, as well as just their student population and understanding the needs that they have and where they are. I mean, so that's just kind of, you know, where we are moving forward. We are looking at that language again that you specifically are referencing and seeing if there's anything that we can do to make adjustments on that. I've also been texting with the House folks regarding that as well, considering they were part of that language drafting.
Thank you, Senator Ballard. Senator Davis, hold on one second. Senator Brown has a comment he'd like to make on this subject. Senator Brown?
Well, on this subject, maybe just in general, I just want all the members to understand that we're still getting a lot of guidance from the federal government on how we can spend some of these dollars. Plus, we're still learning on where the needs are at. And so, you know, we're trying to take this a step by step to make sure that we don't spend all the money up front and then have needs show up that we didn't know about later that we don't have money to address. So we're trying to be as cautious as we can, but at the same time, take care of what we know are immediate needs. And so having said that, I just hope that the members will work with us and understand that, you know, some of this stuff is playing out as we talk, and it's going to be months before we know all the information on and how best to attack it. And so it's a challenge, I think, for all of us. And plus, I think flexibility is a key issue coming from the federal government. Right now, we don't have very much flexibility, and so that's a concern we have because, as many of you know, there's a debate going on in Washington if they're going to give any more flexibility or not. So we've got to be very cautious that we don't have to spend state dollars to fill some of these gaps that maybe we're spending money at today, especially knowing that our budget situation in the next couple of years is going to be very tough as it is. So again, we're just trying to be as cautious as we can, get as much information we can, and cover the greatest needs that we know of as we move forward. You know, we're going to be back in 3 weeks or so to maybe go around with round 2 and address more information that we have. But I just hope everybody will be patient with us and work with us as we try to deal with all this.
Ms. Chair, I would like to, if I may, redirect a question towards Senator Brown based on the explanation. And Senator,
Could you yield for the questions?
I will.
And Senator Brown.
Senator Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Brown, I would first make a brief comment and then ask the question. But, as we're waiting for flexibility and hoping that the federal government would allow us flexibility, I think it is important for us to also understand the importance of that flexibility with our LEAs as well, in terms of, those allotments there and providing more flexibility. I believe that at all levels, that level of flexibility would be obviously is appreciated. But my question back then to my greater point, if we are establishing expectation to put these remote learning plans in place, then are there certain priorities perhaps that we should focus on? For instance, would it be important for us at the state level, now that we are in a pandemic situation, irregardless going into the future as well, go ahead and put the infrastructure in place, such as learning management systems, Canvas, perhaps connecting to the portal so parents can then access that infrastructure. And where I'm heading, certain infrastructural aspects, in my opinion, may not match up with those timelines that we may be waiting to hear back from on the federal government.
Senator Davis, you got a great question, Mr. Chairman, if I could answer. Yeah.
Sure, absolutely.
Right now, the feds have allocated about $400 million to the local LEAs. We've been told that they can apply for those grants and that they will should receive those within 3 days. So there's $400 million out there from the federal government that's available to the local LEAs. Plus, the governor has his pot of $93 million for the local LEAs. It's in this particular bill. So there's about $500 million that the LEAs can have access to work on some of these issues that you just talked about.
Okay. And another follow-up question here for you, Senator Brown, if you yield.
Go ahead, Senator Davis.
I don't think you yielded to me last time I asked you to yield, but I'm going to yield.
I guess that's payback, right, Senator Brown? But I told you you're still my friend. I was just having a tough day today.
Senator Brown, will you continue to yield to Senator Davis?
I will.
Okay, Senator Davis, your question.
When we're looking at all these dollars, federal dollars, maybe some with the governor, I guess my question is, when we understand the need that's come in, and as we're still understanding that need through a consensus DPI and state board, request, are we looking at the amount of the need or the request so far and comparing that to what dollars are out there? Because the other part of this is, at the end of the day, how much state dollars are we going to need, in particular with K-12? And perhaps that's part of, still some ongoing conversations. But I'm just trying to make sure, if the need is already outpacing the available dollars, are we actually tracking that in itself?
Senator Davis, the best way I can answer that question is, we're trying to use as much federal dollars as we can at this point, and holding back as much state dollars as we can, just because of the budget situation we know we're going to be in. In my opinion, we're going to be facing somewhere in that $3 to $4 billion shortfall with our budget next year. So it's going to be a real challenge, I think, for all of us to work through these things. But with the federal dollars, we want to make sure that we're using those in the best way we can. And the LEAs are giving us a lot of information on a daily basis. We're out there, talking to them constantly. So we're going to do the best we can to put the dollars where it's needed the most.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Davis, I'm going to give you one more follow-up.
Senator Ballard may want to comment on that as well.
Okay. Deanna?
Do you mind?
No. Go ahead, Senator Ballard.
On the last two questions and your points, and just to follow up on what Harry has said, I think it's also important to remember that there are certain things maybe listed on the combined requests from K-12 that perhaps may have a recurring dollar issue, like we've been talking about, even with state dollars. So for example, Canvas, it's great to have the 5 million up front, but there is a recurring dollar that would probably be tagged to that moving forward. So my point is also in understanding and the domino effect of some of these requests on a recurring dollar basis moving as we continue ahead. So I think that's why there's still information that's kind of coming in and what we're still trying to gather in order to make, very prudent and responsible decisions in those, and factoring in kind of the direction we want to take our education in North Carolina as well.
Thank you, Deanna. Senator Davis,
So one more question. So I'm gonna just kind of maybe make some comments and lead to my final question. I wanted to thank the work that's going into, in particular, education. I know there was a lot of communication and conversation, and Senator Ballard, as I shared with you privately, I'll share publicly, and that is, I appreciate the enormous outreach and the conversations that we have had and the work that's gone into education. My concern at this point, I believe we should continue to, consider budget flexibility. I do believe that's something that, we should highly consider. I also believe that we should continue to have conversations around delaying the class size reduction. I also believe it's important, and I really want to make this case right now, as there are many hardworking state employees that are essential employees putting their heart and souls out on the line. We still have non-certified in particular who are getting meals out to our kids every single day. I think it's important for us to consider the work that they're doing, possibly putting themselves in harm's way. And I do believe we need to reconsider the supplemental compensation. I just think that is very important, and it's only temporary. And I would really echo, and I'm sorry to say this, Senator Brown, but I think this was part of what got me worked up on that last time, is these are the lowest paid state employees in the state of North Carolina. And right now, with the uncertainty of our budget situation, they are still pouring their hearts and souls out and putting it out on the line. Why? For what purpose? For the students that they believe in, to make sure that they can eat. I think that's, something we have to continue to think about. And then, kind of winding down here, Senator Jackson, to think about the exceptional children, as well as cybersecurity. If we are ramping up, so to speak, here with remote learning, I do believe that there are going to be more priorities. We have to make sure that no children they're not being disserved by the state in terms of especially exceptional children. And we have to protect whatever system, that is out there in terms of cybersecurity in particular. So I want to, again, thank the work that's, got us here. There's still obviously conversations that I think are important for us to continue to engage. And I just hope that we are able to make some more movement in some of these areas. So I guess my question is, at the end of the day, when we look at some of the things, and I may understand that some of this, state, such as the exceptional children, maybe some of the need for some security, the question would be, they'll be open.
Senator Davis, thank you for that question. And, I will try and answer that. With the $400 million that they're receiving, they can do all of those things that you just named out if they so choose to do so. And we've tried to give them maximum flexibility, allow them to use this money as they deem necessary, and so did the feds, from my understanding. But thank you for your questions this morning.
Senator Jackson,
Senator Ballard.
may I respond as well and comment on his statement?
Sure.
Thank you, sir. Again, I would just like to reiterate, Senator Davis, how much I've enjoyed our conversations as well as leading up to this, and your hard work and our diligent work and kind of talking through various provisions and dollars too. Just to remind everyone that is listening, regarding the funding flexibility point that you made, underneath the governor's current executive order, LEAs do have some funding flexibility right now. And so I think the idea is also to understand how that's been working over the last month. It's been the first full month, the end of April. We'll see some expenses and see how things have been going, and then also perhaps reassess and reevaluate the conversation then. But just as a reminder for everyone that they do currently have some funding flexibility. Regarding the class size issue, there's also some questions there regarding that issue. Just remember the class size is also part of the program enhancement teacher allotment formula, which is distributed on a formula that's based really on enrollment numbers. We don't have accurate enrollment information yet, and we don't have accurate revenue numbers either. So it's a really kind of a larger discussion, not necessarily COVID related and specific at this point in time, but again, it is something that we're tracking. We're really trying to figure out the timing of that and understanding that. And then also regarding exceptional children, I believe that we're waiting on some additional information from DPI that for extended school year requirements, that we have that in a couple more weeks too. So just know that there's just still more information. We want to be really smart and approach this prudently and responsibly again. And so just know that those are items that we are taking into consideration. And then, of course, we all value all of our frontline employees, but everyone's really an essential worker right now. So I'm just, as far as the pay, the supplemental pay that you've asked for, just to reiterate, I'm happy to be a part of authorizing $400 million for DPI and the state board to use and to prioritize that and to reinforce that. But again, also LEAs have been using some of those dollars, the $50 million that the governor has basically distributed down to them for some of those services. So really understanding who has already received dollars. Some have received stipends, some have actually received a percentage of pay. So it's also varying and different across the board. So just really giving DPI and the state board the authority to handle that in the best way they see fit is part of what we're trying to do here as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ballard. Thank you, Senator Davis. I'm also going to allow other questions from besides the members, and we have Senator Nickel who has a question. Senator Nickel. Senator Nickel, you're on for your question, sir. Okay, he had sent in a chat for a question. Senator Nickel, are you there? Not hearing any response from Senator Nickel. Oh. Okay, we're getting a text or chat from Senator Nickel. I'm going to read Senator Nickel's question. I'd like to discuss section 6.2 on page 46, dealing with unemployment insurance. I fully support the change in calculating benefits to the highest paid completed quarter, and I applaud the committee for the change which DES says will allow them to move to more quickly determine benefits and allow for faster processing of the applications. I see that this change is only temporary and ends on December the 31st. Why make this only a temporary change? Once we pass December the 31st, we would then revert to the current system, which takes the last 2 quarters and has a practical effect of reducing benefits for jobless workers. I'm not aware of any other state in the entire country that uses the last 2 quarters for this calculation. I would like to change this highest quarter to the permanent after December 31st. I'd like to discuss this provision. And then he asked, would you support an amendment to make this change? If you're asking me personally, Senator Nickel, my short answer is no, but I am willing to have discussions on it. But I think this is a temporary fix that we were needing because of folks being unemployed and needing to get more money than what we currently had in the system. So we allowed the highest quarter for them to be considered in their calculations. Okay, we have one more question. Attorney's oath. Question right there. Okay. The House bill allows for the new attorney's oath. This is another follow-up question from Senator Nickel. The House bill allows for the new attorney's oath to be taken remotely. Right now, they need to be present in open court to be sworn in. Would you support a committee amendment or floor amendment to include the following language so new attorneys can safely be sworn in to practice law remotely? Senator Nichols, I think everybody knows how I feel about attorneys, so I don't even think I've got to answer that question in public. But we will certainly discuss it at this point in time. I don't have an answer on that one. But thank you for your question. Do we have anyone else that has a question?
Brent?
Yes.
This is Rick. I have a question.
Senator Horner.
I wanted to ask about the remote learning provision that Senator Davis discussed. It seems well intended, but these LEAs have been figuring this out since mid-March. Apparently, there's a June 30th deadline here that's subject. And there's 13 items that require an extensive plan. But my question is, when we ask these folks to do this report and submit it, what happens if they don't comply? Do they not be able to do distance learning? Is there any teeth in this request for a plan? Or that's my question. It's drawing a lot of incoming fire from people that are not happy with it. And I don't see anything that says if the plan is subpar, they can't continue distant learning. Where's the teeth in this?
Okay. Senator Ballard, would you like to address that question, please?
Thank you, Senator Horner, for your question. The plan itself, again, is just a starting point. It's a plan for folks have been developing kind of their own best practices, what's happening. I will say across the state, it has been an incredibly mixed bag. So the point of actually trying to offer something in statute was, as discussed with some of the other House working group chairs, as an effort to sort of create a bit of really a starting point and a standard moving forward. The plans are to be basically sent to the State Board of Education for review, but not necessarily approval, if you notice. So the point is they will still move forward with their plan that they present, but the problem is they do need to report that to the State Board for them to report and to read out to us during an Education Oversight Committee to then further address how do we refine this, what are folks doing, what works, what really doesn't work, what was the most, what were the biggest issues? This is really just kind of an ongoing, this is not like a perfect plan right now. This is again, just the initial starting point moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Senator Ballard. Senator Horner, you have a follow-up?
Well, it reminds me of one of these stay-at-home orders. This sounds like a suggestion, not a mandate to do something. And I will expand on this. I just want to make a personal statement. I think it's incumbent upon us to provide these folks that do the work in these LEAs the flexibility to meet these challenges. And I too would be supportive of this class size reduction being included in some plan. That would save us $65 million because we're not going to pay them to do something they're not doing. And I'd be in favor of line item flexibilities in the LEAs. We haven't had really a chance to voice our thoughts on this, but I think we should err on the side of giving our educators flexibility during this time period. And but overall, it's a lot of good thought and a good bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Horner. and Senator Ballard. Senator Chaudhry, I understand you have another question or a request.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Very quickly, I would just also echo Senator Horner's comments on flexibility. I have a request on behalf of the Department of State Treasurer. It's an amendment. It's a very minor change to dates that will allow them to produce more useful data to report to the General Assembly. If you look at the amendment, I think it essentially requests that the information from the year from the time period of July 1st, 2019 through December 31st, 2019 be compared to the same time period the following year. And I think that just provides a better comparison of what kind of reduction they've seen in tax revenues and services due to tax revenues, building inspections, balance of capital reserves, and so forth. This is a friendly amendment that has been asked by the Department of State Treasurer, and so I've had an amendment prepared for this, Senator Jackson. If folks have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Senator Chaudhry. Senator Marcus has sent in a question as to the process of how we're going to be handling this, and will we still be up for a vote at 3 o'clock today? Senator Rabin, can you respond to that request of the process?
Well, yes, thank you, Senator Jackson. Right now, we are scheduled for a 3 o'clock session today. I don't know whether we're going to have to push that back or not. It appears right now that we will probably have to meet at a later time. We have to first allow your committee to review these amendments. Then we will have to go through the voting process in committee to vote on the amendments and to vote on the bill before we can send it to the floor. So we will just have to see how time constraints work. But to answer in a flat note, it is our plan to vote this bill today, if at all possible, at some time. And we want to give the members as much lead time as we can. As we said yesterday, we will not vote before 3 o'clock, but it looks like it might be sometime later from sitting in on this committee and just listening in. You chairs and this committee has a lot of work to do before this bill is ready to go.
Thank you, Senator Rabin, and Senator Marcus, thank you for the question. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator McGinnis, I believe.
Rabin.
Oh, Senator Rabin, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Senator Rabin.
Yeah, you missed me by 2 districts today. Okay, that's okay. But I do want all members of the Senate to know that from 3 o'clock on today, please be present and be prepared to vote.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Rabin. Any other questions?
Senator Jackson?
Yes. Senator Chaudhry, I think.
Just a clarification process. So is this committee going to reconvene to vote on the amendment that I've submitted?
Yes, sir. We are going to go into recess here shortly for an hour and a half, which would be we would reconvene at 1:30 is the plan right this moment.
Thank you very much, Senator Jackson, for that guidance.
You're certainly welcome, Senator Chaudhry. And I think we have no other questions that's come in, but I think Sir Will had a comment he needed to make. Hold on one second. We do have another question. Senator Peterson.
Thank you, Chairman Jackson. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Hear you fine.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Yeah, afternoon now.
Just a question on section 3.3, page 6, number 15, under the allocation of funds to OSBM. Is there any consideration of appropriation for technology upgrades, modernization, any long-term investments? We know how poorly the system has performed with incredible needs in our community with regard to unemployment.
Senator Peterson, if you look at line, I believe it's starting on line 31, it says purchasing critical information technology equipment, continued on line 32, technology equipment and software licenses, enhancing telepresence services, and so forth and so on. So I think the answer to your question is this money can be used for those issues.
Thank you, Chairman.
You're certainly welcome, sir. Any other questions from members or non-members that's on this video conference or meeting? If not, Will?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this is Will Tomlinson with the Information Systems Division here at the General Assembly. I just want to remind members that, or not remind, but rather inform everyone and members of the public who are watching or listening online, please be aware that at the point that this committee recesses, the original YouTube live stream video will end. When this committee reconvenes at 1:30, there will be a new YouTube video stream link. That link will be provided on the ncleg.gov website as soon as it is ready, certainly in plenty of time before the committee reconvenes. But members of the committee who have joined the WebEx credentials that you were provided, those will still work. You can rejoin the meeting just like you joined it earlier today. Members of the public, you can always listen in on our audio feed. And again, the YouTube link that will watch the video portion of this committee will change, but will be available on ncleg.gov.
Thank you, Will. Members and non-members that are listening out there, thank y'all for participating this morning, and this committee will stand in recess to 1:30. Thank y'all.